One good day in algebra. We're moving on to CO39 part 2, which is still solving a system of equations using that substitution method. But the difference here is that now you get to write your own system. So you're writing the equations and then solving them, which is why we spent so much time on the solving piece, so that hopefully you're not trying to do two new things at once. You're comfortable enough with the solving that once the equations are written, then you know where to go from there. Okay. So reading this here, it says you burned 8 calories per minute shoveling snow and 10 calories per minute throwing snowballs at your friends for a total of 560 calories burned in 60 minutes. How many minutes did you spend doing each activity? What about this tells you that you're going to be using a system of equations to solve it? That's kind of the first part, is recognizing, hey, I need a system here. And what about this situation? What about this question tells you that you need a system? Brent. Okay. Start. Julia? Right. The key word here is each activity. How many activities are there? 2, right? You've got shoveling snow and throwing snow. And if you have 2 variables to solve for, how many equations do you need? 2. If you had a third variable, then you would need 3. Right? So far up to this point, before CO38, we solved one equation with one variable. So there's one variable, that's all you need. Okay? So we know that we're dealing with a system here. And here are the steps to set up your system. First of all, we want to identify variables. Okay? What are we solving for? We said that we're solving for each activity. Well, what are the activities? Elise. Okay, so shoveling snow, we'll use S for that. We've stuck with using X and Y, and we kind of started there because we graphed them, and X, Y, coordinate plane just kind of goes along well. But here, if we use X and Y, you'll find yourself constantly going back. Wait, what was X again? What was Y again? By kind of using variables in context, using S for shoveling and T for throwing, it's going to help us kind of keep track of things a little bit better. So that's why we're using S and T. Okay? Good. Step 2. We need to look at the situation and identify the totals. What will our equations equal? We know that we need 2 of them, so I'm going to put 2 equal signs here. Okay? But what are they going to equal? What are the totals here, Erica? Okay, so one equation is going to equal 560. And what does that 560 represent? What are we talking about with the 560? 560 what? Noah? Nope. Calories. Okay. So one of our equations is going to equal 560. And that equation is going to talk about calories. What's the other total? Elise? 60. And what is that equation going to refer to? What are the units, so to speak, for that equation? Gabby? Minutes. Okay. So one equation, 560. The other equation equals 60. Now let's put them together. Okay? Doesn't matter which equation we start with. Let's actually start with the equals 60. That one's a little bit easier to set up, I think. What equals 60? What equals 60 minutes tonight on 60 minutes? Brent? 560 calories. Well, the 560 calories, that's a whole nother unit, right? We've got the 60 minutes. We've got the 560 calories. What totals the 60 minutes? Gabby? Okay, how long you are shoveling and how long you are throwing. What represents how long you are shoveling? S. What represents how long you are throwing? T. So what's the equation? S plus T equals 60. And if you wanted to write T plus S equals 60, that's okay too. They're interchangeable there. Okay. Let me put a little divider line here. Okay. Now for the equation with the calories. What do you think this one's going to look like? Quinn.
Would it be 8s plus 10t?
8s plus 10t equals 560. Where does the 8s and the 10t come from?
How many calories per minute?
Right, that 8s, 8 calories per minute shoveling. That word per is pretty important, okay? In that it kind of connects that coefficient 8 with the variable. 8 minutes per minute shoveling. If we shovel for 5 minutes, we'll burn 40 calories. 8 times 5, right? If we shovel longer, we'll burn more. If we shovel less time, we'll burn less. And 10t, kind of same thing here. 10 calories per minute throwing. That word per, it connects that coefficient to the variable. And once you get to this point, I just solve them, right? And you did that yesterday and one today, okay? 8s plus 10t equals 560, talking about calories. S plus t equals 60, talking about minutes. I want to pause the video, go ahead and solve it, and we'll come back and take answers and process. All right, so we said that we're going to isolate the s variable by moving the t over by subtracting it from both sides. So negative t plus 60 is what's going to be plugged in for s in the other equation. And like we've seen with other examples that we've done, including the warm-up one today, once you get to this step, it's what? Distribute, combine, two-step equations to solve. So we get negative 8t plus 480 plus 10t equals 560. Combine the negative 8 and the 10t, and we get positive 2t plus 480 equals 560. Subtract 480 from both sides, divide by 2. We get t equals 40. And if t is 40, and we spend a total of 60 minutes doing the activities, then s has to equal 20. Okay? And like I talked about when we weren't recording, it's not enough just to see that 40 plus 20 equals 60. You can interchange those. 20 plus 40 will also equal 60. Go back to this equation with the coefficients, because there's only one combo that's going to work there. Okay? We also talked about negative answers wouldn't make any sense. You can't spend a negative amount of time doing something. All those things. Questions so far? Is it better than you thought it would be?
No.
Maybe? Okay. Well, you've done one, so if you're still confused, it's totally okay, right? It probably took you about 100 times to learn how to tie your shoes. Didn't get it after the first time, so we'll just press on. Okay. Second one. It says the members of an outing club take a day-long tubing trip down a river. The company that offers the trip charges $15 to rent a tube for a person and $7.50 to rent a cooler tube, which is does not raise your social status, but it's used to carry food and water in a cooler. Okay? The club members pay $360 to rent a total of 26 tubes. How many of each tube do they rent? Why is this require a system? What about this question tells you it's going to be a system? Gabby? There are two variables here, right? You've got two types of tubes. The question isn't how many tubes, it's how many of each type, and there are two types. So, step one, identify the variables. Okay? What are we solving for? What are we solving for? Go ahead. Elise, yeah.
The number of tubes for like the people.
Yep.
And then the cooler one.
Okay, so let's use P and C here, okay? P for person tubes, and C for those cooler tubes, right? Those are the two types. The question says how many of each type? What are the types? Person and cooler, okay? Step 2 is to identify the totals. What information in this situation tells you what our two equations are going to equal? Look for the different units. What are we talking about here? Noah? Okay, so one equation is going to equal 360, and that represents dollars, right? So 360, and that represents dollars, or if you want to put cost. So when we write that equation, we'll be talking about money. How much does something cost? Okay, what's the other total? It even has the word total right before it, almost right before. Audrey? 26, right? Total of 26 tubes, and that's the number of tubes. Okay. All right. So, which one would you like to start with? Who wants to take a stab at filling in the missing pieces here? I didn't say who didn't want to. I said who does want to. Julia? Good. Yep. $15 for a person tube. So every person tube that we rent is going to cost us $15. 15 times P. Okay. And then for that cooler tube, it's $7.50 for each cooler tube. So $15 per person tube plus 7.50, or just 7.5. If you don't want to put the zero, it's fine. 7.50 per cooler tube equals $360 total. And what we're looking for here is the combination of those two types of tubes that will give us that total of 360. Okay. How about the other one? The number of tubes purchased. What's that one going to be? Straight up, how many? P plus C. The number of person tubes plus the number of cooler tubes equals 26. Okay. And now again, from here, it's just a solving piece. And it's actually set up very, very similarly to the top one, where you can decide whether you want to get P or C alone and then substitute that in. Okay. So I'm gonna, we'll isolate P. So we're going to subtract C from both sides, and we get P equals negative C plus 26. And that's what gets substituted in for P in the first equation. So we have 15 times negative C plus 26 plus 7.50C equals 360. And now, just like the other ones, distribute, combine, two-step equation to solve. Would a negative answer make any sense here? No. Okay. Is it okay if we get a decimal answer here?
Yeah.
Who said no?
No.
Why is it not okay to get a decimal answer here, Brent?
You can't buy like 0.2 of a tube.
Right. What we're solving for is how many of each type of tube. So here, even a decimal answer wouldn't make sense because you can't rent a part of a tube. Okay, it's the whole tube or not the tube. So in the first one, a decimal answer probably could have made sense because you can have, parts of a minute, but here it wouldn't. So that's another way you can just check, did I do this correctly? Does my answer make any sense? You must have a positive integer that's less than 26, right? If one of your variables solves for it and you get 30, well, you know that you didn't do something right. Okay, so maybe.
When we do these, does the answer is it like, can the answer be negative for one of them?
It depends on the situation. You know, if we're talking about like water depth or like sea level depth, then a negative answer might make sense, right? Because if you go below sea level or temperature, right? Temperature, that would, so it kind of depends on what the question is that's being asked. But if you're solving for like a quantity of something, I can't think of an example off the top of my head where you have a negative quantity, except for maybe a bank account balance. I don't know, quantity of money. But anyway, so we're going to solve this. We're going to distribute 15 in, so we get negative 15c. What's 15 times 26? Yeah. 390. Okay. Plus 7.5c equals 360. Now combine like terms. Negative 15 and positive 7.5 is a negative 7.5c plus 390 equals 360. So far, am I on the right track, or did I make a mistake and you're just not going to tell me until the very end? Sometimes you like to play that game. Okay. Move the 390 over. Negative 7.5c equals negative 30. It's going to be a negative 30 because you have 360 minus 390.
Oh yeah, I got
Okay.
it. So,
And since we have negatives on both sides, when we divide here, we get a positive answer, and that is positive 4. Okay. So if we buy 4 cooler tubes and 26 total, how many person tubes is that? Anybody? 22. Obviously this works in the P plus C equation because they're interchangeable. I recommend plugging it into the other one with the coefficients because that'll really tell you whether you got it correct or not. Okay, and this answer contextually makes sense, right? It also makes sense that we have less cooler tubes than person tubes. If only 8 people are going on the trip and you buy 18 cooler tubes, how many coolers do 8 people need? My goodness. Okay, so contextually, this makes sense. Questions on this? How are we doing? Okay, if your thumbs are down, really take this to heart here, right? Look at those 2 beginning steps. What are my variables? What are my totals? It's easy to read a situation and just be kind of overwhelmed with all of it. So start small. What are my variables? What are my totals? And from there, build your equation. Your homework for tomorrow is only one of them. And the one I would like you to do is on the second page. The second one, you are in charge of inventory for your school's concession stand. You can't read the chicken scratch of the worker who sold items that night, but you know there was a total of 133 items. Apparently you only sell hot dogs and sports drinks here. Hot dogs are $1.75 each. Sports drinks are $2.50 each. And the stand earned $266.50 for the night. How many hot dogs and how many sports drinks were sold? What are your variables? What are you solving for? Okay. What are the totals? Build your equation from there. The setup for this one, the reason why I picked this one specifically, the setup is very, very similar to the other 2, right? And see what you can do here. So just this one for homework for tomorrow, solved and checked to completion. Any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, compliments, congratulations, or criticisms? Soybe.
Congratulations.
On what?
You made this really easy.
Well,
Like, it seemed hard.
we'll say I made it manageable.
Well, like when you first look at it, it seems very complex.
It does. Yeah. Well, thank you very, very much. Anything else? All right, folks, with gusto, that's how you math.
Don't forget to lock it.
Algebra.